I'm one with the Force is with me.
I'm one with the Force. The Force is with me. And I'm one with the Force.
Welcome to the Dharma of the Force, a podcast about the spiritual and philosophical side of Star Wars. If that puts you off, it's just words. And if you think that's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo, even better. We cannot widen our horizon and grow by never challenging what we believe, and we should always be suspicious of those who tell us what to believe. In some Buddhist traditions, listening to Dharma talks is a spiritual practice. It's not meant to give answers per se. It's an exercise in looking at questions and elaborating on them, and finding the truth within yourself. So in that spirit, let us look at today's topic. Your first step into a larger world, book commentary. If you've been listening to my previous episodes, you already know that I myself am actually very suspicious when it comes to all sorts of esoteric jargon and self-appointed gurus and such. The same goes for gatekeepers and those who pretend to be the only ones who can teach you the ultimate truth and all that. So I was pleasantly surprised when I stumbled across a book called Your First Step into a Larger World. There are many books and websites about the Force and how to be a Jedi in real life, and I read some of them. I have to say there are usually a couple of red flags here and there, and either the ego or financial interest gets in the way. Like I have pointed out many times, it is counterproductive to look for knowledge only within Star Wars. George Lucas had a vision of what the Jedi are and how to interact with the Force. But before there was nothing. We cannot look at anything in isolation. Buddha didn't come up with new ideas. Jesus didn't make up an entire religion in itself. If we aim to understand, we always have to go back and investigate the roots.
If one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects.
Most books seem afraid to mix fantasy, which Star Wars is, with examples from quotation marks the real world. Every religion has various writings and essays of people with different opinions or agendas, so if we limit ourselves to the few bits and pieces that are in canon, we're like someone who has only 100 pieces out of a 1,000-piece puzzle. And then there's the phenomenon of too many cooks spoiling the broth. How many authors have written about the Jedi or the Force? Who is to say that their interpretations are in line with George Lucas's original vision? With that being said, let's look at the book. The book starts off talking about how ridiculous the idea of following a belief system out of a sci-fi movie might seem at first, and how we all grew up pretending to be a Jedi after watching the movies as kids, and how we should have grown out of it. It goes on to argue that the philosophy and belief system of Star Wars films is associated with mythology, and as such, I quote, "Its purpose is not merely to entertain but to inspire." And at the core of the motivation to be a real-life Jedi is the belief that good people will make a good world. So we work on bettering ourselves so that we can make the world around us a better place. I'm not part of any group, I'm no member of any Jedi forum on the internet, but there is some universal truth there that led me to the same conclusions. It is what made me start this podcast. I'm on the same page with the author when he says that this can be achieved not due to any mystical influence, but rather by unlocking the human potential already inside you through hard work. He puts emphasis on the need of self-improvement, which means being open to the idea that one might be mistaken about a great many things and to take actions to correct it. This is pretty much in the same vein of the saying, the moment you stop getting better is the moment you stop being good. Improvement is a constant process. It's not a level you reach and then you can sit on your laurels forever. But it comes with a warning that is, in my opinion, very important. Following the Jedi Path, if you want to call it that, is not make-believe, it's not cosplay or pretending. So I quote, "We must be cautious, however, on discovering the Jedi Path thinking we are already a Jedi."
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
And once again I agree with the following conclusion. When it comes down to it, becoming a Jedi can be done in 3 simple steps. 1. Acquire knowledge about what it means to be a Jedi and decide what kind of Jedi you will be. 2. Test your ideas in the real world by putting your philosophy into practice. 3. Does your practice have benefit and utility for yourself and those within your sphere of influence? If no, go to step 1 and start over. If yes, go to step 1 and build on what works and make it better. I have to say, as a general theme, the book mostly lacks practical examples, but this is one of the few occurrences the author dared to cross the real-life barrier. I understand the hesitation, though. It is the same as discussing political matters in Star Wars by comparing them to real life or current affairs. It can get heated. In Chapter 1, What is the Force?, the author argues that some Jedi powers are purely fictional. About the power to influence the weak-minded, he says, "These powers lie clearly in the realm of fiction. What Jedi powers are available to us in the real world? The answer are positive mental and emotional attributes of the Jedi characters. Such attributes as calmness, balance, selflessness, compassion, bravery, wisdom, mindfulness, and a plethora of others." While the latter is correct without a doubt, I don't agree that the power to influence the weak-minded is fictional. When I did my communication training, NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming, was all the rage. It's partially debunked now, but there are still some aspects to it that work. This Jedi power was always something with the taste of the dark side, as does its real-life counterpart. The idea is to use words or phrases in a certain way to influence the reply or behavior of the opponent. And it's still all over advertising and politics. If you're a public speaker, chances are you have had extensive training in how to get your point across in a way that listeners have no choice but to agree. There's a whole science behind it. How can we hijack the human language to basically hack people's brains? It starts with easy stuff like getting a positive answer. If you get a yes, you have a foot in the door. And it's often easier to say yes. We humans like to please those around us for the most part. I remember training call centers. If you call someone and ask, "Am I disturbing you right now?" there's a higher possibility that the person says yes. If you say, "Is now a good time to talk?" what do you get instead? Also yes, and you're in. Almost as a natural instinctive response. Is it 100% foolproof? No, of course not. But I trained people who have told me that they argued less with their partners after training simply because of a few words they changed during conversations. I'm not getting into details here, or else I'd have to charge. So I think that communication and conversational skills, as well as the ability to understand or speak another language, can indeed be a Jedi power. Fans were wondering whether or not Han Solo actually had mild force abilities because of his flying skills. I wonder more about that in regards to him kind of being able to talk his way out of situations. There's a very nice sentence in this chapter highlighting the importance of introspection instead of searching for external salvation in form of a savior figure. When I seek within myself instead of trusting an internal agency for strength, I can find it. And it also demonstrates nicely that the author is not aiming to be some sort of guru who puts himself on a pedestal. He's merely pointing the way. More on that later. The same chapter moves on to say, when we recognize that the Force binds us all together, it becomes clear that helping those around us improves the situation for ourselves as well. While the Jedi Path is about world betterment through self-betterment, we must not focus exclusively on ourselves and give some energy towards making the world a better place. And this becomes clear why when we see the connection we have with all others. And that's an important point. Now, I myself am an introvert. I prefer to spend time alone within a very close circle. I prefer the tranquility of nature over big parties, and it has become more accepted to be an isolationist and even joke about hating everyone and all that. What we all fail to see in this bitterness hiding behind humor is that we're all connected. We all have a responsibility towards each other. Even if I'm not interested in group activities, I will gladly take one for the team. Everything else is not sustainable, and change always begins within oneself. Another topic I will circle back to later. Another book mirrors what I've already hinted at earlier. The Jedi Path has no destination. It's a path of constant self-improvement and refinement. And in true Jedi nature, the author adds, "Perhaps you, reader, will have something to teach me." In Chapter 2, The Pillars of Jedi Strength, we see some overlap with other books and some things I spoke about in previous episodes. There are 3 pillars of Jedi strength: the Force, knowledge, and self-discipline. I have nothing to add. Spot on. Knowledge is the central pillar, and likewise, knowledge is central to a Jedi's life. In the context of the Jedi Path, gaining knowledge is the act of removing ignorance. I have found that it's important to realize my limitations of my knowledge, as well as the understanding that I might be mistaken about a great number of things. A Jedi seeking knowledge must have an open mind and a willingness to learn. Including learning from one's mistakes, we need to cultivate an awareness of what we know and an awareness of what we do not. Now I found some of the ways things are phrased here very interesting. The author speaks in a very Buddhist tone, so I was wondering what his background actually is. Even if he's not crediting sources of his insights yet, it has become very clear to me at this point that there has to be some deep understanding of the basics of Buddhism in regards to the Jedi Path. Jedi of quality do not seek to control others, but to be masters of oneself. Without self-discipline, you will not get far in your training. In fact, I would say you would not be able to train at all without it. Or like I put it in a previous episode, allow me the arrogance of quoting myself. If you can manage to sit down for a few minutes every day, what else can't you do? If you don't have self-discipline and conquer yourself, how can you expect to conquer or achieve anything else? In Chapter 3, the author takes on the Jedi Code and aims to explain some of the esoteric aspects some people seem to take issue with. Check out episode 13th for my take on it. But you'll see it's pretty similar. The code does not say, for a Jedi there is no emotion. And so it's not an instruction over what a Jedi should not do, but rather an observation on the nature of emotion. And later, to be a Jedi is not so much what you feel, but what you do with your feelings. A Jedi allows emotions to inform their actions, but does not allow emotions to dictate them. And that's exactly what I discussed in our second episode, Not Allowed to Form Attachments. I don't blame anyone growing up in a predominantly Christian or atheist environment for having a harder time understanding these things. We tend to make snap judgments and take things literally, and that's that. No emotion, that's that, and I don't care if someone dies. The author goes on to explain. Part of the process of not being ruled by our emotional state is to be able to take an approach of non-attachment to what we're feeling and to seek understanding what is contributing to our emotional reactions. You know, like don't eradicate an entire tribe of Tusken because you're sad, or maybe don't kill all your kids and your wife because she wants to divorce you. Recognize your emotions, but don't let them take over. See the difference? This leads us right into the next section, which goes, it allows a clarity of perception that is not clouded by strong emotion. It is this clarity that allows us to go forward with a peaceful resolve. The author now makes the very important point that the second line of the Jedi Code teaches us the importance of knowledge over ignorance. One of the most dangerous things to be ignorant is our own ignorance. Studies show that if asked to evaluate themselves, people with a high IQ quite frequently estimate that they're on a lower scale than they actually are, while less intelligent people often overestimate themselves. And nothing is more dangerous than a fool who thinks himself genius. This also applies to the unwillingness to accept other points of view, as the book puts it. Rigidity of thought and the attachment to what we believe can be a hindrance to learning and being able to obtain knowledge. I like how much emphasis the author puts on this topic. Part of knowledge, or importantly self-knowledge, is an awareness of the biases we carry within ourselves. If you listen to my previous episodes, you will have heard that quite a lot. Of the strongest of these is confirmation bias. This is when we become attached to an idea and we pay attention to facts that confirm this idea while dismissing those facts that do not. And there we have everything from political discourse to sequel trilogy outrage. And the social media algorithms feed into that. Be very, very careful when it comes to social media. Because of our biases, we must be wary of the idea of being completely objective. Our life experiences color our perceptions, and we must strive for empathy when it comes to viewpoints that differ from ours. Many things beyond our control will contribute to our worldviews, and to the worldviews of others we may encounter. While if an experience is different from what we know, our first instinct might be to dismiss it or look at it with incredulity. And I cannot stress this enough myself. It is the recognition of the experience and views of others that we can engender compassion and empathy and grow our knowledge about this world we share. We must be able to let go of our idea of how things are for us is how they are for everyone. This world is a diverse place, and while we may understand our place in it, we must be mindful of the place of others. The author is bravely walking a thin line here. I can almost hear the "leave your liberal agenda out of Star Wars" calls here. It is, in my opinion, very important to check your privilege. I'm pushing the political topic here very far, I know, but we cannot look at these things isolated and pretend they have nothing to do with Star Wars in and out of universe. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that there are many different points of views and perspectives. It would be foolish to assume everyone thinks the same way. And as the book puts it, when we step out of our ignorance, we realize our connection to all those around us. In regards to the third line, "there is no passion," the book explains. In fact, the word passion has its roots in a word that means suffering. Quick side note, also see Passion of the Christ. And when we indulge in our passions, it can lead to the detriment of other areas of our life. There can be a limited utility to passion, but it comes at a cost. While passion can effect change by indulging in such a strong emotion, it essentially becomes self-serving. And by meeting passion with serenity, we can more clearly see the way forward instead of being blinded to the right course of action. Not only does this perfectly describe the fall of Anakin Skywalker, it also reflects, once again, Buddhist philosophy. So it comes as no surprise that the author refers to his Aikido training later on in that chapter. Like all Japanese martial arts, Aikido has its roots in the samurai training and has therefore naturally a connection to their spirituality. You might know already that the Do part in Aikido means path, the path of unifying energy. The same way Kendo is the path of the sword or Judo is the gentle path. So it is clear now why the author chose the term Jedi Path, and I have to say I like this approach. He recognizes the Jedi teachings not as something fictional, but as a philosophy that can be applied to real life. As a collective noun like Bushido, the path of the warrior, the Jedi Path combines all these aspects mentioned earlier. It doesn't matter that the term Jedi is fictional. Its origins have real-life counterparts that can be used as the basis of your belief. I have a little comment to make when the author states that he has been told that Randori means dance of chaos. That might be a common translation in the West, but a better and more literal translation would be catching or taking on disorder. So I guess in a way it fits, as he goes on to say, one does not move apart from chaos, one moves with it. I don't know a lot about Aikido, but I know from Kendo training that not every practitioner understands the origin of words and some things get lost in translations. I'm blessed to be married to someone who studied Japanese translation and still remembers most of it. I seem to have forgotten more than I ever knew over the years. The book encourages you to meditate over it and give it some time to understand. Monks recite sutras over and over again until their understanding transcends words. It would once again be arrogant to assume that I read it, I got it all. I won't change my opinion about any of this ever. As you sit with the code, study the code, and live the code, your understanding will grow from what the code says to how to apply the code to your life, to understanding why the code says what it does. Wise words, but don't forget, you have to walk the walk if you talk the talk. Chapter 4 focuses on the importance of compassion, and naturally the tone shifts even more to Buddhist language and could be something that Dalai Lama said. Where attributes of the dark side, such as fear, anger, hate, and greed, lead to suffering, the attitudes of the force, such as non-attachment, calmness, selflessness, and compassion, lead to the cessation of suffering. It is this desire to lessen the suffering in others that is the root of Jedi compassion. And in that, the Jedi Path is identical with Buddhist teachings, which is why I encourage everyone who is interested not to look for in-canon wisdom, but to substitute and fill the gaps with its worldly counterparts of real-life philosophies. I'm not saying Buddhism is better, and please don't join some cult or guru or even go to some local meditation group if you don't feel like it. Heck, I have issues with that. But please don't limit yourselves. But please don't limit your search just because it's not Star Wars and get stuck in a weird extended universe books and comics loop. Be open to find wisdom wherever it might lay, because as the book puts it, it is this striving for the best possible versions of ourselves and the training involved in getting there that allows us to operate as Jedi in the world of the everyday. Applying compassion with our sphere of influence should be guided by a strong moral center. I would suggest that a moral code that is specific in nature but very general in application is superior than one that is general in nature and specific in application. Absolutist thinking that takes the form of a Jedi should always or a Jedi should never fails to take into account the circumstances and environment in which a decision has to be made and an action taken. The book lists the Jedi Creed out of a young adult reader from the time of the Phantom Menace that still expresses it perfectly. Jedi are guardians of peace in the galaxy. Jedi use their powers to defend and protect, never to attack others. Jedi respect all life in any form. Jedi serve others rather than rule them for the good of the galaxy. Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. And there's a very important point there that gets often overlooked or conveniently ignored, and the book picks up on it right away. The respect for all life is central to understanding how we should act within our sphere of influence. That reminds me a lot of Jainism. Jainism is an ancient Indian religion predating Buddhism that is founded on 3 main principles that might sound familiar: non-violence, non-absolutism, and non-attachment. Practitioners of Jainism are all vegetarian, even vegan, and monks often carry brooms with them to avoid stepping on insects. You might now point out the times in which Obi-Wan Kenobi or someone else killed some monsters in self-defense. The book has a perfect explanation for that. We must be careful what we emulate from the fictional Jedi. It is not the case that because a fictional Jedi said something or did a thing in a Star Wars film, that we as real-life Jedi must also do this thing verbatim or at all. I'm not going too much into animal liberation propaganda here, but I always find it a bit sad and uninspired when an author doesn't account for this part of the Jedi philosophy and writes about nerf stakes and whatnot. But if we talk about respecting all life and defending those who cannot speak for themselves, we cannot, in my opinion, end this line of thought at the next drive-in for convenience reasons. It's also very easy to point a finger at the Chinese or Koreans for eating dogs and not look into the mirror. We're so civilized, others are not. Does that sound like something that is in line with everything we discussed earlier? The book speeds over this topic quickly and focuses more on the interhuman aspect of it, and it's sad that we still need to discuss it. The author states, Respect is based on a tolerance and advocacy of human rights. As Jedi, we will want the best possible just outcome for the greatest number of people. And this often happens by advocating for those that are being oppressed by those in power. If that's too much for you, I first wonder why you're still listening, and secondly, get ready for this. The author now steps into political territory, a very brave move if you ask me. He says, I'm reminded of a photograph. It is a picture of 3 women of color protesting, and they're holding up a sign with a quote by Desmond Tutu that reads, "If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." How very true can this be in the Jedi community? Some will advocate for not taking sides, not getting political, saying that it doesn't apply to the Jedi path. However, if we're going to play more than lip service to the concept of justice, it most certainly does belong in the Jedi path. And it may place Jedi in a minority position, but opposition to oppression in all its forms is the side of history a Jedi should find themselves on. I applaud the author for clear words like that, and I 100% agree with that statement. Cosplay as a Jedi, play dress up all you want, but if you study the teachings and follow their philosophy, there is no doubt about it. On the subject of the need to take action, he adds, there comes a time when we stop waiting for all the planets to align and we take action in less than ideal situations, because waiting for favorable weather may allow suffering through inaction. And predicting Yoda's speech in The Last Jedi by many years, he adds, addressing and repairing mistakes, however, is a vital part of the Jedi path. Chapter 5 deals with attachment and non-attachment. I recorded an entire episode about this because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, attached, no pun intended, to this subject. And the author even quotes Yoda, "You must train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." He knows, as I do, it is not easy. There's a process to let go of attachment, and it will take sincere effort and training to be able to do so. The first step of being able to let go of attachments is to be able to recognize the attachment you have in your life. It's easy to say, I don't have it, and then disregard all of that as hippie gobbledygook. There are plenty of self-help books about how to deal with problems or how to fight addiction, and they mostly start with, the first step to change is awareness. Or the first step is to recognize that there is a problem, that you are an alcoholic or something like that. Remember back to your early teachings. The first noble truth in Buddhism is the realization that there is suffering. Only then can we move on to the next step. The book now finally also mentions the origins of the Jedi teachings. While George Lucas has said in a 2010 story meeting for the Clone Wars television series, attachment leads to fear, which leads to anger, hate, and suffering, the Buddha simply said that attachment leads to suffering. I think Lucas may have identified one of the paths that lead there. Oh, absolutely, I even failed to see the difference. The Buddha famously was very much on point with his statement, so the additional steps are nothing but a self-explanatory elaboration. We're now coming to the more practical example, starting off with an important reminder. Make no mistake, this is training, and it is difficult, but like a muscle that is exercised, your self-discipline will grow stronger over time. I met so many people who told me they tried meditation and it's not for them because they didn't like it. I could quote the famous "if you fall, get up, if you fall again, get up again" line, but Bruce Lee said it even better here. If you say that something is impossible, you made it impossible. I also tried it, and I also didn't get it at first, but here I am. The book continues. To begin, I suggest a reflective meditation examining our inner lives and trying to understand the process and reasons behind what we think and feel. Once we have an understanding, we can use our self-discipline to try to change the way we see things and how we react to various attachments. There is no try, right? I personally recommend a slightly different route, but people are different. Everyone will have different requirements. First and foremost, the thought of clearing your mind is key to meditation. If you focus on something, it can help you, but you close yourself off from what might arise naturally. Even if you try to clear your mind, thoughts will find you. By predetermining your focus beforehand, you cancel those maybe more beneficial voices from the subconsciousness or who knows the force out. And I suggest to take a step back, let go of all thoughts and watch them drift by, inspect them, investigate them, but don't cling to them, move on. I've recorded 2 whole episodes about that, feel free to check them out. Chapter 6 deals with focus and attitude and jumps right into another parallel to Buddhism when the author declares, I do not see the Jedi Path as a religion, rather I see it as an applied philosophy. While a religion is concerned what a person believes, I see the Jedi Path as the cultivation of attitudes, and it is these attitudes that are expressed as actions. Potatoes. Words are tricky. Everyone has their own interpretation. When I use the term religion, I do so in the more original sense of the word, as a repeated action or ritual to get in tune with the divine in all of us. Most people will understand religion as an institutionalized dogma, so I absolutely understand the need to clarify the differences. The book goes on to elaborate on Qui-Gon's famous quote, which I also devoted an entire episode to, by explaining, when events happen in our lives, our perception of those events is colored by what we pay attention to. Later, the book uses another real-life example to demonstrate the virtues of the Jedi. And you know, I'm all about the real-life examples, so I really like this one. It doesn't matter if it really happened that way. What matters is the message. To cut the story short, a company was seeking to hire someone. They tasked them with an impossible job. Everyone tried to do the job and failed. Everyone but one, who looked at everything and said, I can't do that, and got offered the job. It is very important to know our limits and evaluate the situation correctly. There's no glory in recklessness and hubris. The chapter concludes, for our purposes, it is a great example of the Jedi attitude and humility with confidence. Chapter 7 deals with the importance of diplomacy. In recent years, we have heard a lot of winning and the need to succeed. This is once again a very unsustainable way of living your life. The book highlights the art of negotiation is capable of achieving results that fighting cannot. When we fight, this sets up the dynamic of adversary versus adversary. However, if we approach things as a negotiation, then those in conflict are not enemies, but rather negotiation partners working towards a common goal. If we remove from the equation ideas such as winning and losing, then that opens the pathway for compromise. Compromise is an agreement reached by mutual consent and makes it possible to create a situation where no one has to lose. So what do we have here? Letting go of the selfish attachment to the idea that the outcome has to be 100% what we envisioned it for ourselves, and understanding that other people have needs as well. I have experienced this in a work environment many times, and I'm always surprised how rigid some people are in a scenario like this. I don't remember the quote exactly, but it's something like, a hard twig will break, while a soft twig slightly bends. Don't break. Find a common goal if possible. People are usually not that unreasonable, and if they are, there's another motive. This is when the skills of communication I spoke about earlier come into play. The book goes on to add, there will always be people that disagree with us. Some of these people may even be demonstrably wrong. However, it has been my experience that people will form a strong attachment to the feeling of being right, and will hold on to these attachments even in the face of overwhelming evidence. They will seek out confirmation and validation rather than seeking out the sometimes difficult truth. Simply pointing out that they are wrong is rarely a successful tactic. Demonstrating that they are wrong hardly fares better. The only way for success is to lead them in such a way that they discover the correct conclusions themselves. And this is something I, for example, tell vegans repeatedly. You will not change anyone's opinion by shoving photos of slaughterhouses down their throats or by calling them barbaric for eating meat. I'm myself vegan. You might have guessed that from a few things I mentioned earlier. But if that made you roll your eyes, check yourself. Did I ask you to be one? Where's your reaction coming from, and what does it mean? So naturally, I had my fair share of comments criticizing me, but the thing is, never to my face. No one seeks discourse by insulting one another. But I've had plenty of people asking me for advice and being curious or genuinely interested by being available and supportive rather than preachy. And that's the key to everything. No one ever joined a cult or something by yelling, "The end is near, you're all Satan's sheeple." Using nice, tell me more. So we're back at communication and diplomacy skills. Even in leadership training, if your management style is leading by fear, you will never get anything out of your employees. If you lead by example and based on trust, you will bring out the best in your people. In Chapter 9, we now talk about the importance of physical practice and martial arts. I quote, "We must train ourselves to move our bodies in harmony with the way it was built, and this even applies to the way we sit and stand." Well, the sitting bit is a bit tricky, as the human form wasn't built to sit in front of a screen all day, but when we look at the way we carry ourselves, it is even a common theme in old Hong Kong martial arts movies. The martial artist is often found out while being disguised for whatever reason based on the way he moves. And that's something I noticed myself. I used to have very bad posture until I started Kendo. I have to confess I haven't trained in a while, but my stance remained. I never trained any hand-to-hand combat, but it must have been 12 years ago or so that some troublemakers got into the concert of a band I was friends with, and somehow I got pushed into the action. So suddenly I was standing in front of this huge dude who was keen on fighting me, and in a split second I evaluated my options. A peaceful resolve was no longer possible, as they had already pushed around some young girls and were actively seeking confrontation. I seemed to look like a good target. Now what to do? Risk injuring the opponent, which should also always be avoided, or be attacked yourself. Instinctively I went for a punch to the chest that made him lose his balance and topple over. Before it could turn into a full-on brawl, staff managed to intervene and threw them out. I've never been in a real fight before, and I'm not even saying I'd have won, would have continued, but I took measures that ended the fight. There were some instances in which I got attacked from behind because people didn't like the way I dressed or looked before, but at this time I had already participated in sword fighting tournaments. And when done right, the sword is an extension of our arms, as the book points out correctly. Empty-handed techniques of the samurai were based on sword mechanics. So what I did was instinctively, without even thinking of it, create distance between us. It was a feeling, an instinct. The force guided my movements. It's the same in meditation. Once you find the correct posture, you will start to carry yourself differently. And that is an important point in martial arts. It should never be about attacking, always about exuding the confidence to keep people from targeting you. And if we're looking at martial arts as a competitive sport, the book has an important message as well. When we concentrate solely on winning, we lose sight of what is really important. And it is more important to lose well than to win poorly. That statement alone is probably very political these days. But let's look back at the guys who went to a concert to start a fight. The book makes a very important point. A person that hurts another has something wrong with them. One could say they're out of balance. And while it might be hard to find empathy in the moment, we have to remind ourselves that there is a story attached to this behavior. We should pity those who feel the need to resort to violence because they cannot articulate their emotions and feelings otherwise. I felt, spoiler alert, Maul's death scene in Rebels extremely powerful and emotional. There is no hate from Obi-Wan. There's even an intimacy when he holds his dying opponent in his hands. The last chapter of the book concentrates on the very important topic of being your own master. I really commend the author of including this. There is no Messiah, be your own salvation. He points out, while I encourage seeking out mentors, I think it is better to have no teacher at all than to have a bad teacher. And that's the same old message that institutionalized religion likes to censor. We are the path, there is no other way.
Only through me can you achieve a power greater than any Jedi.
In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus allegedly made the same point. No need for churches to be close to him. If you split wood, I'll be there. If you lift a stone, you'll find me there. It is no surprise that Jedi don't have idols. Through the Force, we're all connected. Through the Force, we're all equal. So when the author points out that if we have a master or a mentor, we should engage with them with the understanding that they are not an authority over us and our training, but rather a guide. I completely agree. Don't follow false prophets. Don't let the air of authority make you ignore red flags. A good leader or a good teacher is there to support and nurture you, challenge you at times, and lead you to find the answers you seek within yourself instead of just handing them to you. Before I conclude this long book commentary with plenty of trailing off, I'd like to point out that there is something I do not agree with in this chapter. The author argues that there is no need for temples or shrines, but I find it very important to have a secluded, separate place, and it can just be a small nook or corner dedicated to your practice. Obviously, we don't pray to a Yoda statue or whatever, but I think it is very important to have a clear line between worldly distractions and a place of contemplation. Many people find it helpful to light a candle or incense or ring a bell or bowl to mark the beginning and end of your meditation. Other than that, I consider this book required reading for everyone interested in living the Jedi way or learning about how to incorporate the spiritual origins of their teachings into your daily life. If you want to support me or this podcast, don't send money. I don't have a Patreon. Find a charity of your choosing and donate. And do yourself a favor and switch off your phone, disconnect, and just sit in silence for a few minutes. Close your eyes and
Breathe. Just breathe.